Welcome, everybody. I'm Misty Beryle, the owner of Mindful Living Wellness Center here in Salt Lake City, Utah, a place to bring intentional healing and balance through physical, mental, and emotional care. Our goal is to help you in your journey through education of self-sustaining tools such as talk therapy, life coaching, emotional wellness, mindful yoga, and any variety of healing and wellness. Our purpose for these podcasts are to share information about staying well, however that may look like for you, our listener. Thank you for joining us and welcome to Please Wash Your Hands. Today we have with us Aubrey Adams-McMillan, and she is a professor at Westminster College here in Sugarhouse, Utah. And we're going to be talking a little bit today again about silver linings and what life looks like before quarantine, after quarantine, and during. I guess we're still kind of in it, aren't we, Aubrey?
Yeah, we are.
Just to let you know a little bit about myself, I started Mindful Living last year in 2019 with a dream to be able to help people just in really all aspects of healing and wellness. I myself was diagnosed with PTSD back in May of 2019. And a lot of what we're doing now stems from the therapy that I went through and was introduced to. So it's been really neat to see this come to life. It's also been really interesting as we opened our doors at the beginning of the year and started getting traction. And then the quarantine hit and we had to close our physical location. And really, I guess my mind just kind of went to, well, either I'm going to sit back and do nothing or I'm going to do something. So what am I going to do? And I thought online, everything we can do online. So I got some of our people together and we started talking about making an online presence. And one of those decisions was a podcast, which here we are, and creating some of our services virtually, and then just again having that online presence with social media. And that's where we brought Alex into the picture. Alex is our common denominator here between Aubrey and I, and he's just been doing awesome with our social media. But tell me a little bit about you, Aubrey, and what you do.
I'm very multifaceted, actually, but how Alex knows me is through being his voice teacher at Westminster College.
Oh, nice.
I teach in the music program. I am an adjunct professor there, and I have been lucky enough to have 12 to 20 students every semester work with me. And the beauty of a liberal arts education is that the people who come to work in the liberal arts are people who often seek mindfulness. It's a word that is used quite a bit, but I find that once you open that box, it is Pandora's box, talking about mindfulness. But that's one component of who I am. I teach voice. I'm also a professional singer. Yeah. And
I'm like, wow.
I know.
I'm sorry,
I
but
have a
we
very
can
fun
see each other.
history of singing.
Sorry, Aubrey.
I have always felt that music chose me.
Oh, wow.
And I also am a mother. So I have 3 children, 3 boys actually, and I'm a wife. And I have so many interests. I am constantly opening books and reading and trying new hobbies. I recently planted a butterfly garden and looked into how to sustain the life of a butterfly. And
Wow.
it has just brought me so much joy. So
You got to tell me a little bit about this.
I do a lot of things. And so obviously because of that, I am the perfect candidate to pursue mindfulness on a daily basis.
I love it. Tell me a little bit about your butterfly garden.
Well, the butterfly, it's you have to have varying kinds of plants. And those plants need to bloom all year long. The first stage of the butterfly's life, you need sedum plants, and I have these autumn blooming sedum plants that are gorgeous. They turn this like golden autumn color in the fall. And throughout the summer and the hotter months, because sedum has so many little pockets, that's where the butterflies actually put their eggs, the babies.
Oh, wow.
And so that's where they get their beginnings. And then I have all kinds of things in my butterfly garden. There's milk thistle, um, there's coneflower daisies, there's what else is in there? There's so many
Do
plants,
you
but
decorate
I,
it?
I love it, and it's absolutely beautiful. And last year I had 10 butterflies in my garden. So
Wow. And do they live there? Like
yeah,
they frequent. Oh, that is so cool. I love the
isn't
visual.
it cool?
Tell me a little bit about what got you into the industry. Sorry, going
Oh
back to
wow,
um
of singing.
yes.
Well, I have always felt this way. I really do believe it chose me. Um, it's interesting. Performing didn't come easily to me. Musicianship did not come easy to me, but I think my passion was in my persistence.
Mm.
Um, and really, truly, over and over again, opportunities presented themselves to me. And every time I sang, another door opened. And
Wow.
so I really do believe it chose me. Um, and it's constantly teaching me every day how to be a better person, how to connect with people. Music is about collaboration, learning to look for the best in other people, how to um, connect to music that maybe you don't necessarily love, but someone else did. A composer somewhere loved what they wrote.
Wow.
And so for me, it's always an opportunity to learn, to connect. And I find that music, I'm very disciplined. None of my teachers ever had to beg me to work hard. Um, but it's I can't say that there was ever like a defining moment. It just I grew up in a musical family. My mother is a classically trained violinist.
Oh, wow.
I played the violin for 11 years. I took piano off and on as a kid, but really just didn't love it. Um, and I'm sure I fought with my mother horribly about it. Um,
I've been there.
but it's every time I have sung, a door has opened. Every time I sing somewhere, someone reaches out to me and says, I love your singing. Will you sing for us? And so it just really has been the path that I've taken. I mean, obviously, I have an undergraduate degree from a fabulous school in New Jersey called Westminster Choir College.
Oh, wow.
Um, and I think that was where I really learned what music is about. And it's a gift that I have carried with me for many years. And then I sang professionally and did young artist programs for about 10 years. And every time I sang, people would ask if I could teach them. And I was really excited about the prospect, but found teaching to be quite difficult.
Really?
Um, and I wanted to know everything there was to know about it, and I still do. And so I pursued a graduate degree at the University of Utah, and I had excellent instruction there. And they really let me focus on the pedagogy component, which was what I was most excited about. And I still love watching good teachers. I like to see what they do and how they work with students. And so that's how I got to where I am.
That's awesome. Um, Tell me a little bit about how work, now that you are a teacher, you are the instructor. How does that affect your family and your family life and the normality of it?
I think it has 100% made my family dynamic better. Um, I think to be an effective teacher and to have a reputation where people trust you with one
Yeah.
of the most vulnerable and sacred things, their voice, their body. Your
Mm-hmm.
body is your instrument. And everybody has a unique story in their body, right?
Well, yeah.
And it's a sacred experience. And so I think there is a point for every successful teacher who has, longevity in the career field where you have to surrender and learn with them. And if you don't, you're constantly dealing with power struggles
That's a
of who's in
beautiful
charge,
statement.
right?
Yeah.
Who's learning here? Um who's the teacher and who's the student? And I have found that the best and most organic learning comes when both the student and the teacher are passionate about learning together.
That's beautiful.
And so that is what I try to nurture. And I really feel like this opportunity to be a teacher at such a high collegiate level has been a blessing to my family because it's changed the way I look at my job, if you will, of being
Mm-hmm.
a parent.
And
Um,
how you interact with your own children.
mhm,
Wow.
yeah, I enjoy it much more. Um, I see that as a teacher, every single thing a student brings my way, whether it be that they have a more calm and introspective demeanor, or they can be a student that, like Alex, should have his own YouTube channel, right?
Right?
Right? Um, there's so many beautiful ways to live and to be. And all of those personality traits bring out something beautiful in people. And when those are nurtured, when they see those characteristics as a strength, and when they're given permission to make messes and to try new things, the more permission I give a student, the better the outcome. And so that is true in the case of my kids and my dog. Shh, hold on.
You're fine.
Hey, come here, mama. Sorry.
Oh, no, you're fine. You're fine. When you were talking about applying it to children and how it affects your home life, it got me thinking a little bit about my own interactions with my children and with my fiance's children. And this last weekend was a little bit tough, and I noticed a lot of acting out. And when you mentioned wanting to learn right alongside, when I had stopped and did a little bit of introspect and thinking about what was going on in their mind, what was going on in their life, and I realized um, it it made me kind of think I am okay. I when I was listening to you talk about learning with them, I realized this weekend that's what I did, and that's when my attitude started changing. When I started to understand what they were going through and kind of learn alongside with them and see how life's going for them right now versus just how I'm viewing it, I opened up. My love just opened up and we got along better and things started working out better. I love how you brought that out where learning with your students, learning with your children, how that can just bring more peace and really mindfulness, right? Because you're being present, you're being right now, what's going on. Can you tell us a little bit about pre-quarantine and post, like, and now? What was life like before quarantine and what does life look like right now?
Before I answer that, I just want to say thank you for sharing that about your heart opening up with your kids. Because I had this like connection to you because I have absolutely experienced that with my students, with my children, with my spouse, with my stepfather when he was passing away from cancer.
Wow.
it's amazing how when you meet people where they are, miracles happen.
Yes. Wow. I just got
And
chills.
love is, there's no question that love is real and that it really is what people need. People need to be loved. So I just had to share that.
I love that.
Um,
No, it's
so
organically go.
pre-quarantine, I think most working moms, um, feel busy,
Mhm, for
right?
sure.
Um, and I don't use the word busy as a way to sort of slack off of my responsibilities or say that I don't have time to connect with people, because I do. Even though it's busy, it's full,
Mm,
right? Um, my life was busy. I have a son who was excelling on the high school swim team. My second son is just in love with math and science and is constantly talking to me every minute about philosophies he has or ideas about the world, and also is a golfer. And then I have a 4-year-old who is going on 16 because he has these older brothers. So um, they're literally on a daily basis. If I am not mindful, I would really feel like I was in a hurricane.
mm.
That most people um, would just feel frazzled, but it's full and it's meaningful. And I, for me, mindfulness switches always to purpose,
Wow.
right?
Mhm.
You can't be mindful if you're not realizing that every minute of your day has a purpose.
Well, and doesn't the word busy itself almost make you feel like you're just grasping at the next string, trying to get to the next one thing to the next?
Uh huh.
Busy. And then when you said full, just the words itself, it was more peaceful and in control in that sense of I got this. It's full. It's on
Hmm.
purpose. I
Right.
love how you worded that.
And I really, every component, I think in order to be happy and to be mindful, you have to decide that there are things you want to be doing, right?
Mhm. Very
For me,
intentional.
if I think I want to drive my son and his friends to swim practice because I can get to know them. That drive to swim lesson is I get to have a conversation with my son. It's the first time I've seen him all day, right? I get to drive these beautiful humans to swim. I get to know them as people. And then when I go to their swim meet and I know that it's been one of the most trying months of their lives and they reach a PR, it's like the fact that there's laundry to be done, the fact that there's dishes when I get home, it doesn't matter because in that moment, I know why I'm there and my purpose is clear
And
is
you
to
have a connection with
support.
them.
Yeah.
I have to say, as you were saying that, my my relating was or my connection. My son, he works literally barely under a mile away from our house, and I always encourage him to walk. I think he should walk. I used to make him walk to school, which was quite a farther distance than this, and I was so grateful because recently I kind of did that same thing, what you're saying. I took it in and I'm like, this is an opportunity he has to practice driving. This is an opportunity I have to spend 5 minutes with him. I look me just one on one because he doesn't live with me full time. And so I started changing my mindset. And as you were talking about that, I'm like, wow, it is. It's what made all the difference. How I viewed it instead of, are you kidding me? I got to take this time out of my day to go drive him where he could walk, and just this complaining aspect, flipping
Hmm.
it to this more intentional. I want to take him because I get this time with him now. Like that was
Hmm.
beautiful, and that even pulled it more alive out of me. Of yeah, remember you do enjoy that time with him, and this is a good
Hmm.
experience. So thank you for
Oh,
sharing that.
yeah, of course. I mean, that when I tell people that my life is busy, what is interesting to me is, and definitely interesting, not from a place of judgment, is I get a gamut of responses to that. I get pity, I get sympathy, I get, "Oh, well, let me just send you dinner 1 night a week," or I get all of there's so many responses, um, and I think it's interesting, because for me, busy just means we're living,
Oh, that's beautiful.
right?
You're
Not a
alive, you're
single
able.
one of us is complacent to the joy of being alive and pursuing something we're passionate about, right? Every
Totally.
single one of us wakes up every day and we're excited to start a new adventure. And so um, I've stopped using that word as much because whenever I get that vast of a reaction to something I say, I realize that it gives that I need to be more specific because a word like that, people identify differently with that word. There's
It's
nothing
true.
wrong with that word per se, but that's one of the beautiful things about mindfulness, I think, is that I get to have that moment to reflect and be curious about those responses rather than instantly defensive and to prove myself or to engage in any way.
Right?
Instead, I ask, well, do you have a second to hear what our day is like? And then they usually will say yes, and I'll give them a typical day at my home. And that seems to be less, there's less room for interpretation based on a word that has carried a definition based on one person's experience to the next. Because if the goal to get to know me is to really understand what my day is like, then I should probably be more descriptive than use a word like, well, busy.
Right.
I don't know. It's something I'm having, a realization about taking in feedback
Oh, I think it's
from,
wonderful.
people's reactions to things rather than my gut reaction is to feel defensive sometimes or to feel like I have to explain, you know.
Right.
But yes, pre-quarantine was very packed with um, specific, all of us have passions. My husband is a software engineer, I'm a singer. We People didn't think it was going to work, but we're just still madly in love. Um, and you know, it definitely at times there were lots of signals, probably once to twice a month of like, put on the oxygen mask, right? And so, like, because we're all passionate and we're pursuing life and it's full and rewarding, that is also stress in a lot of ways. And so, um, probably the most difficult thing about having a full life like that is making sure I'm really connecting with everyone and going, okay, is this shortness with me? Do we need to have a conversation? Like, have I done something to create some kind of tension in our relationship, with anyone in my family? Or is this we all need to just watch Toy Story 4 and eat popcorn and not be like creating or doing something, but just
Taking a
so
break.
that's the most difficult thing. And sometimes my resolve is a little tired. And so I'm also tired and not knowing what I need. And so there's a lot of growing and constant learning around that. What does one child do when they just really need things to slow down for a minute? And because we're all different, we all manifest that differently. So it's and then also not just me being in charge of that, but nurturing that trait in my children so that they know how to say, I've reached my limit and to take a break.
And would you say that's how
basically.
you practice mindfulness? Right? Is there a specific way, or just kind of that's how you practice mindfulness throughout your day? And again, this is pre-quarantine, so you go through your day, and is there a specific intentional time that you practice mindfulness, or everything that you actually just explained to me sounds to me like that's how you implement mindfulness throughout your day? Is you're able to stop, take a breath, reflect, and be present, and be like, okay, what exactly is
Hmm.
going on here? Is
Hmm.
so my question to you is, do you have a specific time where you practice mindfulness, or is it literally just bleed through your day because you've implemented it throughout your life?
I work to be constantly mindful. And one of the big, I mean, one of my favorite books is called Self Compassion by Christine Neff.
Nice.
And she has this beautiful way. I will not be able to quote her, but she and her researchers have come to conclude that there's a big difference between awareness and judgment. And I had an aha moment several years ago where I realized that most of my thoughts happen because of people around me, situations. My brain is quite active. And what I've realized is that in striving to be mindful, the activeness of my brain has not stopped. It's my reaction that has stopped.
I think that's, oh,
So I
sorry.
no longer judge my thoughts. I just don't allow myself.
Mm.
I just choose to be aware of them.
I think that's a misconception. People, when they think about mindfulness and being present, is like clearing your mind, nothing's in there. But it's quite the
Hmm.
opposite. You're
Hmm.
allowing your mind to be that, and you're more reflective and understanding of your mind.
Yeah. In fact, the big shift for me has been when, like, classic scenario, you wake up in the morning, you didn't get a great night's sleep, your body hurts, you're feeling sluggish, you don't know what you want to eat. It's like the typical morning of just like, bleh.
Yeah.
Um, and years ago, I used to instantly jump into judgment of my situation. And then that judgment would lead to thoughts about how my day was going to go.
Mm.
And one of the words that I have started just infusing every time I have a thought or a sensation in my body, I say, interesting.
Ooh, I
And
like
it's
that.
powerful because it's
Yes.
like, and it's not like interesting, it's not like a judgmental interesting. It's more of a like, oh, your body's tired and you didn't sleep well.
Think on
Huh.
that.
And then and then the next question I ask myself every morning in mindfulness is, what does my body need right now?
Wow. To be in touch with self like that, that's beautiful. I
It's
love it.
pretty
It's very
fun.
inspiring. um,
It's fun.
Alex told me of a word that maybe you can explain a little, or a phrase, the growth mindset.
Yes.
Tell me about the growth mindset.
Oh, growth mindset is everything.
Mm,
Um, of all of the books I've read in my life, I think, okay, I have to sort of preface this. Um, in my, one of the things I noticed the most in singing is that, and this is not by any means, this is more of a curious thing for me. I have friends who came in with not very impressive talent, to be honest.
yeah.
I mean, and they knew that. They knew that they were considered more of like the scholarly singer or whatever. And what I found in my life of like looking at successful singers is that the first component I've seen consistently is that they all make bad sound. from time to time.
Wow.
But how they responded to like an inaccurate pitch, singing out of tune, inaccurate rhythms, they were much quicker to look in and go, huh, okay, so I think I sing a quarter note. And there wasn't judgment. It was
Mm.
like fascinating to me,
My
right?
brain just exploded. Growth mindset. Like, I got it. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Right.
Because instead of judgment, instead of beating yourself up, you're taking it and growing from
As
it.
an opportunity to
Oh,
learn. In and so what I found is, I mean, the chasm is wide and huge. What we do in a practice room versus what we can do when you put 2,000 people in the hall, I mean, that is what separates the pros from people who are good at what they do, right?
wow. Okay.
It's
Yeah.
that extra element. And I've always been fascinated by who are the people that chasm is this big, just an inch, that there's such a small difference between what they do in the practice room and when there's 2,000 people in the room with them. What kind of security is that? And that's what I want to build in a human being.
Wow.
Work ethic and the ability to know that it doesn't matter how many people are in the room. What you do consistently is the path. And what about the joy in that, right? There's literally no joy in being an expert. And in her book, Growth Mindset, um, she doesn't say you will ever be an expert. In fact, when you have a growth mindset, you come to conclude that you will never be an expert at anything.
Because doesn't that keep you growing? Doesn't that keep you interested, keep you wanting to learn?
Yeah. It also changes the playing field for a performer.
Mm.
Because if it's your last performance, if it's an audition and it's your only chance to show people what you have or what you can do, in growth mindset, there's no such thing. Every time you sing is an opportunity to learn. And that can be wide, right? It can be, oh, you know, I didn't get to the space soon enough for me. And so next time, I think it would help me feel more settled if I got to the performance space 10 minutes earlier.
Wow.
So it's never thinking that it's doomsday or that you can beat yourself up for any reason. It's, what did I do? How did that work for me? Did it or did it not work? And if it didn't work, then let's try something else next time.
And I see that as mindfulness. Really, I don't think anyone would be like, oh, that's exactly mindfulness. I mean, unless they were really familiar with it, they would see. But again, going back to people kind of misinterpreting what mindfulness is or whatnot, and just kind of the mode, but it's not. It's taking a step back and looking inside and seeing yourself right now. That being present, just
Hmm.
like what you explained. That's
Hmm.
awesome.
I also think, as you bring up mindfulness, something that's incredibly important to me um, is there are a fair amount of people that believe that athletic edge, right? That performer's edge comes from a harsh rigidity
Mm-hmm.
or from, just being brutally strong. And I don't know that I disagree with them per se, but I do believe there are two ways, maybe three ways of developing strength. And I think that the mind, when it is strong and when it's malleable and adaptive, and so I've noticed for myself and for many of my students that it is impossible to be malleable and adaptive as long as the critic is on your shoulder.
Wow.
So I strive myself to consistently catch the critic. And I love big magic. Anyone who has never read it, I would say go get it now.
Am I taking notes?
Um, because I love, 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 love the way Elizabeth Gilbert talks to her critic or
Hmm.
talks to fear. I think in her book, she describes the critic as fear. And so I don't I don't engage in a fight with my critic anymore. I actually see my critic as my friend, but I know for a fact that there's a voice that's no longer the critic. It's an external voice I learned in society that isn't my critic. And when that voice comes in, that's the danger zone. And I have to be assertive with that voice, and I have to know that that's actually not my voice. That's not me. That's something else. That's something I picked up in society, and that's not authentic me. So I can't live with that voice inside. And so I have a name for that voice, and I tell that voice with all due respect, please be quiet.
You're so
And then my
polite about it.
critic,
I
I'm
love
like,
it.
hey, I hear you, boo. I know what you're up to. Me too. I want to sing a tune. I want great legato. I want this phrase to be what Mozart dreamt about. But
Mm.
you know what? I need you to just kind of hang out for a minute. Because I got to like get my hands in the sand and I got to build something right now. And you're kind of interrupting that process. Can you be in charge of my rhythms or, and that may make me sound like I'm crazy, but it's a delight to be in my mind when I'm learning music.
I
If I
love it.
can balance those three voices.
Well, the recognizing, and I was going to ask you, how did you come to recognize the social voice, the voice outside of you?
Um, I honestly think it was reading a blog post. It was a girl's blog post, and I don't even remember much about her, but someone brought it to my attention um, because they had read this blog post and it made them sob and it upset them and they wanted to know my response and my feeling about it. And it was a blog post, someone like sort of fighting back to the like self-love movement saying, if you're overweight, you should be relentless with yourself. You should punish yourself. You should beat yourself up every day because how are you going to get where you need to go? And I was like, reading this, and I was like, and at the time I had kids, and they've been an incredible mirror for me. And again, going back to what we talked about earlier, that it's through love that children learn.
Mm.
And I just thought, what if I talk to my kids this way about one of their personality things? The result would be horrific. And I was reading this blog post, and then I did the worst, like going down the rabbit hole ever. I read the comments,
Oh no.
and there was so much fat shaming.
Mm.
And it did
Wow.
two things for me. It, one, validated that so many of the messages I've been told in my life, I didn't make up. They're there. And that if I'm going to build resilience to that, I have to decide how I want to talk to myself. And I thought, it is just not in my nature, and it never has been, to beat someone up when they're down. Never.
It's never effective. And why do we do it to
It's just never
ourselves?
been my way.
Mm.
And I know people who do, and I don't necessarily dislike them, but it's not who I am.
Yeah.
And so that was sort of the first ictus, if you will, for realizing that so much of my external world
Hmm.
had been um, not effective, you know,
Right.
and for me, weight has always been an issue, so it was very easy for me to connect with that topic, right? I think that's a
Right.
component that's important to talk about too. Um, so it was very real. It wasn't something that I could just detach from because I don't struggle with that. Um, and then there was reading in the comments, there was just one person who said one line, and she said, "You can't take care of something you don't love."
Wow.
And that was her response. So I texted my friend immediately who had asked me to read this, and I said, "I'm sobbing over that because that's probably the most real thing out of all of it." The rest of it was just kind of like people reacting and it was just messy, but that was clear and it was focused and it was profound.
Yes. Wow.
And so in every component of my life, I decided to think about that. How how can I, with the things that are thrown at you as a professional singer with kids. I mean, kids don't throw up only on days you don't have gigs, right?
Yeah.
They don't have tantrums only on days you don't sing the hardest performance of your life. No, they're like 40 seconds before you walk out the door.
Mm.
Um, and so, with all of that stress and pressure, and I thought, I'm going to really evaluate that voice. And it took probably months to figure out that that voice wasn't mine. It was someone else's. It was an external voice I had learned to internalize. And then I'm a little bit stubborn. Okay, I'm a lot stubborn. And I decided, well, I'm not going to let someone else's voice rule my life. It was kind of
Right.
that big, like, I'll be damned if I'm going to allow
Yeah.
this kind of negative, mean, no.
I love how you recognized it. You recognized it and said, "Yeah, I'm not gonna. That's not inside of me. I'm not gonna listen to that."
Yeah, I was like,
Wow.
ew, if you want to live your life that way, gross.
But I am in control of my life, and this is me, and these are my thoughts, and these are that's really amazing. And going back to the mindfulness, where you're able to stop, internalize, and see what is. I mean, really, I think a lot of, in a really simplistic way, one could say mindfulness is asking why. If you could,
Oh,
the most
yes.
simplistic way to describe it is why. Why did I have that thought? Why did, and you continue the why. I mean, you could break it off to where did that come from and whatnot, but yeah, when you take that introspect and ask yourself why, or maybe even like I said, where did that come from?
Hmm.
Um, that's kind of the first. I mean, I'm not professionally saying that, but that seems to me the first question that you could stop and turn inside of your mind and kind of start inquiring of where your thoughts are coming from and are they your thoughts, and what
Hmm.
can, because somebody else maybe listening might be, I would love to get to that point, right? This is something that you've been able to take in your life, which is so inspiring. I am truly inspired and so excited to continue my days asking myself, stopping, thinking about what's going on, what can I do for my body, what can I do for myself, why am I feeling this way, and really grow. Okay, so I was thinking of something that while you were speaking about growth, something I've always told my children is change is the only constant, or the only constant is change. It's something that's helped me because you can't stay stagnant. Think of how a pond smells. It doesn't have any water moving through it. And it's gross. It's stagnant. I mean, you can really have that visual imagery, almost senses there. But change is inevitable and it's necessary. And so, going back to what you had said about constantly wanting to grow, constantly wanting to learn, I love that. And coupling that with mindfulness and being able to go inside your mind and ask yourself and have that growth mindset. Wow, like seriously, I'm just like, oh, I'm so excited. These are things I'm going to implement and really focus on, because especially right now, if we're going to go with current events, there's a lot of stuff going on that's outside of our control. What can we
Mhm.
control? What can we do? And it's up
Mhm.
to us. It's up to us what we want to do with that, and if we're going to um, take a forced vacation, if you will, even though it might not be a true vacation for a lot of us.
Mhm.
Going back to the quote unquote busy, the full life. I don't know about you, but I have definitely taken my priorities. My priorities have changed since we've been under this quarantine. I've
Mhm.
realized what's more important in my life and what I was putting in my life that maybe I didn't need to, or what I was spending a little too much time on when I should have been spending a little more time on this other thing or whatnot.
Mhm.
It's kind of helped me step back and focus on my own mindfulness for sure.
That's great. That's great.
It is.
For me, what has made, being in quarantine manageable, um, because that's the thing, I think mindfulness is a practice, it's not a destination. So, one of and that's sort of adding it on your adage about change is the only thing that is constant. Um, I think for me, discomfort in life comes around my expectations of
Mm,
myself. Um, and what is a beautiful thing is to look at beginnings, right? So anytime my environment, my job, anything that changes in my life, the first thing I look to is I like to remind myself that there's a massive learning curve. And so when there's a learning curve in place, if I'm waking up every morning and being like, it's 10 a.m., no one's out of bed, you haven't done your workout. This is great. This is the road we're going to go down, and everybody's going to be miserable in quarantine. I mean, that is the way the human brain likes to kind of for many,
right?
myself included. And I spent the first week just being curious. Like,
Mm,
interesting. We're all a bit more hungry. And I denied the temptation to judge that and think, oh, well, we're all going to gain weight. Or, right? But I'm like, interesting. Huh. And I noticed then that most of the food we were eating didn't have a lot of fiber. So I was like, okay, we'll just add more fruits and vegetables. So every meal now, I put out fruits and vegetables on a plate. Uh, but I feel like at the beginning, life felt pretty chaotic.
yeah.
And I was getting email after email, 3 kids, 3 different schools, 5 emails a day. It's easy to start having this expectation that I'm going to know how to manage this, right?
Yeah.
That, like, if I've reached mindfulness, that I'm somehow going to be able to handle everything thrown at me and there's going to be no discomfort. And I'm like, of course, there's going to be discomfort. The mindfulness in me absolutely embraced the discomfort at the beginning and used the discomfort as a model, if you will, of like, okay, we've gone from no routine or from lots of routine to no routine overnight.
Yep.
So let's implement some kind of routine. So the first and it really is through just not expecting myself to know how to navigate difficult situations just because I've navigated old difficult situations doesn't make me more or less equipped to do anything than anyone else.
So what I'm
It's just being present and recognizing what is working and what isn't, and making those adjustments quickly. And in quarantine, and in feeling like we can handle this, and there's going to be lots of messes and lots of learnings, my boys played their most successful piano recital yet to date last night.
Wow,
Both of them were struggling to remember pitches, to remember rhythms, and both of them played flawlessly at the recital.
that's wonderful.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah. When you had mentioned you just kind of sit and observed, you, by allowing everything around you, by allowing your feelings to happen, you and learn from that. Like I've never really thought about that, but to be able to observe things and then go with it like that, that's wonderful. What a great piece of advice, really. Something that my fiance's always told me, and it's funny because I've always been a little bit more into the mindfulness and different things, and he's very much a man's man. And he's about the most mindful person I've ever met. He's helped me through so many difficult situations where he's like, "Why are you fighting your emotions? It's okay. Just allow it to happen." And I'm like,
Mhm.
oh my gosh, like, do you realize what you just said? Like, naturally, you know what to say, but it's true. The less we fight our own internal feelings and what's going on and sit back, observe them, allow them to happen. This sounds like a really weird analogy, but when I was pregnant with my first, I kept going into labor. And of course, there's the Braxton Hicks, and then there's you just don't really know what to do with all these pains, and is it really lasting the time that it's supposed to, and how much of it is, I don't want to say forced, but like, when you tense and you tend to fight something. Anyway, I went into the hospital for like the third time, and one of the nurses said she watched me as I was going through the contraction, because ultimately what was going on is nothing was happening with my body. I was getting all these pains, but nothing was happening. And I would go into the hospital and relax because now I was in the hospital. Um, and so they'd send me home because, anyway, whatever was causing my body, she watched me through one of the contractions, and she's like, "You need to stop fighting the pain." She's like, "Let it happen. Let it do its thing." And I had the baby the next morning. Like, it was amazing, but just by that allowing, and this is a physical pain, this isn't even just emotional thoughts. It was
Mhm.
amazing to me, and I always go back to it, how naturally and organically things happen when we stop fighting it and
It's
allow it.
huge.
Yeah.
It's huge. It's been a gift to me.
Mm.
Um, when I allow my feelings to be, it's in the resisting that the pain really comes.
Yeah. And the
When I'm like,
frustration and
"Ooh, that stung," and I sit with it,
mhm.
and it's not right or wrong, I'm far less to lash out at someone because, you know, maybe what they said was or wasn't insensitive. And how do we really debate that? I mean, there are obvious things, and I am the first to know how important an apology is when something is insensitive. Because the thing is, everything's insensitive when we don't know what someone else is going through.
It's true. It's true.
And that's where I used to be really curious about that because I've noticed in my life that some people are so very rarely influenced emotionally by other people's responses or actions. And that has always been fascinating to me because that seems like an emotional awareness that is strong, and what an amazing trait. And I perceive those kinds of things as something I can develop in myself. And so um, I think that you can't evaluate someone else's reaction to you or someone else's insensitivity in a healthy way unless you first begin with evaluating your own reaction
Yes.
emotionally to those things. Because some people don't have my life story, and I don't have other people's life story. And I'm far more readily, um, I can acknowledge and apologize easily when I realize that emotions happen and they can be quickly let go.
Mm.
They don't have to have power over me because I can allow it and release it. Whereas if I try to fix it or blame someone or make it go away and have this idea that I'm never going to feel left out or feel misunderstood or um, feel sort of like picked on or any of those things, it's part of the human experience.
A
And
vision.
so, but I'm also very, um, having children has really taught me that we also have to tell people what's appropriate.
It's okay to
And
set
that's
boundaries.
that's the other thing about mindfulness is when you allow yourself to feel, when you can say that versus when it's something that needs to just let lie because it's just an emotion that's going to work through you. And at the end of the day, we're all going through this together.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I'm very visual, and so I had this poetic imagery for you, if you will, when you were talking about allowing instead of fighting thoughts that come in or emotions or feelings. And I thought of this big gust of wind. And if we try to stop it, it's hard and there's resistance and it's not okay and it's just this constant fight. But if you just let it blow through your little house, your mind, it happens and it goes through and it goes on and it's okay. You're better for it, you're worse for it, whatever it is, you learn from it, right? That's no judgment. You just learn from it. But you let it happen and then it's done. That's how I feel like when I allow my emotions, there was a time I was getting so frustrated. It was quite a few months ago. And I was in my closet and I was really getting frustrated with getting dressed. There was obviously, it was the smoke, the fire was something else, but I was just, and my fiance said, first of all, I said, I just want to jump out a window. And I was so frustrated. And he's like, just let it happen. Just allow it. Just go with it. And I'd never really been told that before. Going back to when I had kind of mentioned how he has helped me to see things and allow things to happen. But yeah, my whole life, I think that I've always tried to fight it back. Be
Hmm.
strong. We tend to set these expectations with either children sometimes or
Hmm.
whatever the conditioning in our life has presented. But I think it's a beautiful thing to be able to, as you said, teach your children, and create a better future. I'm sorry to go like deep, but it's just like if we can teach our children these things and let them
Hmm.
continue with it, and then they are able to teach their children. And going back to this last weekend with my fiance's kids and how I was fighting how they were acting versus allowing them to feel what they were feeling, trying to get an
Hmm.
understanding maybe of what was going on in their life. Totally different scenarios, totally different feelings, and the connections started to be made when I allowed them to feel what they
Hmm.
were feeling. And anyway, I think that's wonderful.
I love that so much. I have two things to add to that because I have a student who is so mindful. Every time he is the most present human being I've ever met. And he and I were talking about the importance of mindfulness and about being malleable. And we were talking about malleability in regard to singing and how voices that are malleable and can move are actually the strongest and most efficient in singing.
Wow.
And he said that it reminded him of a parable and something true in nature, that the strongest wood in nature comes from trees that actually bend the most in the wind. Bamboo.
Oh, That
Isn't
was
that
not the
like,
first thing in my
I
brain that I was
know.
envisioning.
And
Wow.
that is what I think of every time I have a challenge that I feel, I'm like, am I ever going to reach a point where I don't feel discomfort over growing? And I'm like, oh yeah, that's a destination point. There's no such thing. In growth mindset, we never arrive. We're constantly learning, right? And and when you're mindful and you pause for a minute and you realize the emotion is not to be fought with. It's to allow. Um, I had this moment in watching someone else's parenting. Now, as a I do just have to say that I am very careful not to judge people's parenting as like a you should never do that. Like,
Mhm.
you know, I feel like parenting is the easy way to judge people nowadays, and everyone can do it and get away with it. Um, Unfortunately, I don't hear a lot of people talk about the experience of being a parent. And I feel in many ways, the generation that's raising kids right now has challenges that no one has had
Yeah.
before us. We have more information, more medication, more electronic devices, more responsibilities, less support systems in place. We can't leave our kids in the car and just run into the, you know, to put mail in the mailbox. I mean, we are faced with different challenges, and I feel like when that comes, would be really nice if people could consider that in parenting nowadays.
Yeah.
That we have challenges that are different, um, and and many of those challenges that are challenges are also blessings if we use them correctly, right? But I witnessed someone once. Um, a parent came in, didn't really see what happened, but saw that the child was hysterical, and the parent just kept insisting that the child stop crying.
Mm.
Stop crying. This isn't that big of a deal. Stop crying. And the crying became more intense. The crying then became lip quivering, right? And in that moment, I don't feel that the parent was being mean. I feel like that's the way the parent talked to themselves through life.
Yeah.
Buck up, show up, leave the emotion behind. I very much know people that way, and I very much have identified with that many times in my life. Um, but what I observed in that moment is that it didn't work.
Right.
And so for the next year of my life, I did an experiment. And every time my kids were upset, I tried just saying nothing and just holding them. And in a year's time, I noticed that they didn't cry as much. When they'd fall over and they'd be obviously bleeding, they'd be like, oh, it's okay. It'll get better. I know how to fix this. And I said less and did less than I had been doing for years because I grew up with parents that bucked up.
Yeah.
And when you didn't give kids tough love, you weren't loving them because you weren't giving them essential tools to handle life. That was how they were raised. That is what they knew,
It's the best
right?
they
So
knew, right?
in no way was there ever malicious intent, right?
It's just the best they knew how.
Yeah. And so I was like, well, if this doesn't work and my kids turn into, you know, disasters, I'll stop. But I only noticed that it got better and better. And the second they'd cry, I'd pick them up and I'd just hold them and I'd say nothing. I'd just rock them.
Wow.
And within a year, I had kids who were far better at managing their emotional upheaval. So I don't know what that's worth, um, but it's definitely taught me so much about my own internal voice and what I'm saying. So,
Mm.
like when I work out and I'm feeling the real like pain of working out,
Yeah.
plus the disappointment of like not being an athlete or, you know what I mean? Whatever it is we feel when we work out
Yeah.
or not being able to do something as well as you want. And remembering that if I am kind to myself, if I don't act like those feelings are just going to go away or that I should just instantly stop them and have some superhero like power to do that, um, within 3 breaths, I'm moving through that move and I'm doing okay, you know?
Yeah, that's awesome. It's actually very again, I've said this throughout the interview, but it's very inspiring. Like I'm excited to implement that with my kids. Sometimes I talk a little too much. Sometimes I just need to hold, just need to allow
Mhm,
them to feel that. It's like a sense of validating what they're feeling, they're feeling. We're not fighting it, we're not telling them it's wrong. In unspoken words sometimes even, well, not unspoken, but like
mhm,
sometimes between our words we kind of give that impression that it's not okay to cry.
mhm.
And like you said, the parent that was like, stop crying. Because in our mind, we just, I've been there when my children were super young. That was when you made that comment, I'm like, yeah, I've been there. And
Yeah.
that wasn't okay. And it never
Oh,
presented the
yes.
results that we
And
wanted.
and and that's the other thing too is it goes full circle, right? It's not something we just give our kids, it's something we give ourselves.
Yeah.
Because I've definitely been that mom that's like throwing a Nerf gun, saying, "We'll never be hoarders," and being like, "What just happened?" You know? Losing my mindfulness for a few minutes. And I think that that's the concession, right? Is that like I have to make that concession for myself too because I'm learning on this journey as well.
Yeah.
And then when I'm like gentle with myself, I realize that that one girl's voice has been in my head all day,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
And then I'm reminded, oh, I just spent a day of not being mindful.
Because it's not
Okay.
perfection. Mindfulness is not perfection. It's a
Right.
practice.
But if I were not to give the same concession to myself, right? I'd be like, well, you need to buck up. That's not appropriate behavior. And then we'd all have a really uncomfortable meal at dinner because mom is like in some weird world, right?
Yeah.
Instead of just like mom being like, hey guys, guess what? Here's what happened today. There's a lot of pressure to be a specific kind of mom. And mom lived in that head all day, like the voice of like, well, you're not this and you're not this enough. And you're not like,
Yeah.
mom lived in that world all day. And then she just snapped and she did something she's not proud of. And I want to apologize to you for that. And I love you and I'm sorry.
That was
And then I
something.
can go on. And I
Yeah.
know that I'm not perfect and that I am going to make mistakes and I'm going to feel things like my kids. I'm not a parent. They're not a kid. We're in this together. Mindfulness is definitely not about letting go of routine. I know a lot of people who think the world exists and functions when there's order in place. We don't have time for everyone to cry and have a meltdown. We have things to do. And, I very much understand that perspective because I am a routine girl. I like to know laundry's done on Monday. I separate my darks from my whites. I do the darks first. I put the laundry away in a certain way. But now that I understand what causes my discomfort and my unhappiness is if I'm not able to adapt should something happen on a Monday. Um, if I can't just breathe through it, if at first I go, oh, that means laundry is going to drag out all week and I feel discomfort because my routine is thrown off, I allow myself to feel those feelings. And then I just kind of go, and then I just focus on being present to whatever it is that's taken me out of laundry. Should it be One time we had to take my son to the ER to have an appendectomy.
Wow.
So whatever was on the list for that day didn't get done, right? And it's not, do I sit in nervous land all day being like, how am I going to get that done? No, I just stay present with him. And I imagine that bamboo bending in the wind and knowing it won't break, you know, that um, there will be time to do everything. And I do have limits, and I need to know those limits.
Yeah, that's important. It's important. Some
Yeah.
key elements, routines, allowing with that mindfulness, and boundaries for sure. They bring a nice set of balance.
I think the routine and the structure is one of the harder things in the mindfulness pursuit.
Would you say, like, with if we could go into the imagery, the allowing the bamboo to be so firm and hard, but yet so flexible, so
Yeah.
routine and structure, but yet, and that's that hard, that rigid almost, but learning that it doesn't have to be the oak, routine doesn't have to be
Hmm.
like um
Right.
yeah.
Right. That it's, is your routine, I think this is something everyone has to ask themselves, myself included. How strong are you if, how committed are you if, like, for instance, this happens daily when I'm doing laundry. There's ultimately a moment that the laundry's done. I'm ready to fold. I'm at that point. And I know every minute I postpone puts me into longer laundry day, long, 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 longer laundry day. Um, and so it's just the awareness that the laundry will be there, that it doesn't throw my day to the wayside if I take 5 minutes and read a story with my toddler and focus on whatever it is he needs in that moment and just stay present. In fact, it it's more efficient in many ways.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree. Yeah, going back to like children and receiving their validation, you give them that little bit of attention that they need in the moment, and then they're good. It's like you just fed them for a week. No, but
Yeah.
they go, and it's like the more you push them away, the more you fight that wind from allowing it and stuff. It's like they just keep coming at you, and you're like, but I got to get this done, but I got to get this done, and it's a constant battle versus take that minute. Children really, for the most part, there's a lot of different variables I understand, but they'll be appeased and then they go about playing and parallel playing or whatever it is. But they usually get that validation, usually, I want to say
Mhm.
satiates them, but
Yes, it does. I agree.
yeah. Oh, I'm so glad to have had this conversation with you. It's been so fun and so
Me too.
insightful and inspiring. And I appreciate you so much. And I hope this is the beginning of a beautiful relationship.
Me
I
too.
can't wait to meet you in
And
person. And
when we can actually go out, we should go and get some coffee,
I would love that. I would
and I
absolutely
would
love
love
that.
to hear more about your story and coming to mindfulness. I think that is my favorite thing to hear from people.
It was amazing. Changed my life, changed my therapy. It was the turning point of fighting everything, and all of a sudden having that allowance is like true change. And
Mhm.
I'm off my medicine. I'm way more stable than I've ever been. It's amazing. And it's not like this strict change, like, oh, you have this rigid regiment that you've got to follow. It's just those simple things that you incorporate into your life, that mindfulness and journey. That's one thing in our little goal mission statement of mindful living is we're here to help our clients in their journey and intentional healing and teaching them, the self-sustaining tools. Those are phrases that you hear often throughout mindful living, but
Mhm.
yeah,
Mhm.
it's just about allowing and teaching and it being a journey, a true journey. I think I've known that for a long time, that life and true growth is not a destination. Like it's a journey and you enjoy it.
That's really great.
Yeah,
I
well,
think I spent most of my 20s thinking there was a destination point.
mm,
And I can honestly admit that because I've learned that I didn't know any better.
yeah,
You know?
yeah.
I'm just doing the very best I could. And I had some really good coping skills and not so great coping skills. And
Throwing baby food across the kitchen when I was freaking out.
right. I
Real
mean,
moment.
it was art.
Yeah. It was along the wall. Oh, yes. I'm very glad to be on I'm glad to have walked the paths I've walked, and I don't want to walk them again. I'm glad they're in my rearview mirror, but that's not to say that what's in front of us is, it's going to be a journey, but I think the thing that gives me strength is knowing that I have some great coping skills and the knowledge now of mindfulness. It's huge. It's really a
Mhm.
truly wonderful thing. And I'm meeting more and more therapists, talk therapists, that are incorporating mindfulness. And I love that. Absolutely
Yeah,
love that.
it's really great.
Thank you so much for joining us. It was so nice to have you, Aubrey, on today's podcast. I just wanted to leave you all with a poem that I find inspiring and a little bit of resilience amidst everything that's going on right now. Your best stories will come from your struggles. The seeds of your successes are in your failures. Your praises will be birthed from your pains. Keep standing. I have never seen a storm last forever. Seasons change. This poem was by Cynthia A. Buchan-Bale. We hope you've been inspired, encouraged, and learned a little bit about what mindfulness looks like. Everybody, have a mindful week.